research project was vocabulary acquisition and iPad use in the foreign language classroom. So my research question, which I tried to address through my research, was how does iPad use in the classroom affect foreign language students' vocabulary acquisition in comparison with traditional methods? So basically, technology in the foreign language classroom, technology has been a part of the foreign language classroom for over 30 years. So technology in the classroom can be anything from VHS to audio. It's called CALL, Computer Assisted Language Learning, and it consists of anything that uses technology. So everything from the old school headsets, again, to VHS. But current technology, now as we see the advances in technology in our world, we also see it infiltrating into the classroom. So use of iPads, cell phones, and tablets have become increasingly popular in foreign language classrooms as our technology advances. This is commonly referred to as mobile learning or M-learning. The difference between call and mobile learning is you're thinking about devices that you can actually move around the room as opposed to a desktop computer or a stationary TV. So these tools have become more and more acceptable for use in the classroom. So previous research has really investigated and highlighted the benefits of M-learning, mobile learning specifically with these type of devices. They have found that there's a flexibility of time and space. So if a kid has a smartphone, for example, they can use it in the classroom and they can take it out of the classroom. And they've drawn conclusions between the effectiveness of using these devices and the teaching and learning, so student performance. There's also been studies that show increased student motivation and that it facilitates communication between peers and between teachers and students. So specifically, we're talking about smartphones, we're talking about all different types of technology. With relation to the iPad, when the iPad came out, it basically revolutionized M-learning because you have these large screens that were not available before where you could take them around the room, unlike laptops. And with the touch screen and the camera and the video, kids are able to interact in groups. They also have a positive influence on learner motivation like we saw with other technology. Kids were more, when they were surveyed in qualitative research, they were more excited to learn the content and felt that it benefited them in a positive manner. Also, the studies have shown that because we already have smartphones and they're so part of our everyday, that when we brought the iPad into the classroom, students and teachers had less of a problem trying to maneuver them. There was no learning curve because they were already using smartphones, so when the iPad was introduced, it wasn't a new technology that they had to figure out. Okay, so specifically, we've kind of covered technology in the classroom, and then when you're talking about a foreign language classroom, vocabulary acquisition or learning vocabulary words are a really important part of whole language learning. And iPads and apps are starting to be used as for targeted vocabulary instruction and practice, as well as intervention. So when there were numerous studies, there's a wealth of information on the differences between like online learning vocabulary versus traditional flashcards. A lot of us are used to old school index cards where you write the word on it, and so a lot of these compared the two, okay, or they used My Word Champ or a myriad of different online tools. A lot of them found a positive association between the use of online in comparison to traditional forms with learner performance. So students that use the online tools a lot of times perform better than those who use the traditional flashcards or traditional dictionaries or whatever traditional paper method that they compared in control and experimental studies. And then specifically learner attitudes towards technology were measured with relation to the iPad and seemed positive. So although you have all this research that has investigated mobile learning, okay, and also vocabulary acquisition, there seemed to be a lack of research that specifically addressed high school students in the foreign language classroom. So you had a lot of English language learners abroad, in Taiwan, in Turkey, of lower levels and then ones at university level, but there was a real gap in the research on American students or students from the United States in the high school level, beginner learners of a foreign language or a second language. So my research specifically wanted to address that question, how iPads and vocabulary acquisition were connected to learner performance in that particular setting. So basically, I used an experimental static group design. The study was conducted over 3 weeks in a foreign language classroom in Louisiana. Participants were high school foreign language students in their second year of study, and they were in an urban fringe area. So basically what the students did is all the students were given a pre-test. So none of them had had exposure to this vocabulary before, and they were given 10 questions with 3 pictures across. And this statement was read twice. For example, in Spanish it would have been like, La chica usa jabón, the girl uses soap, and they would have to circle this. So they all got the pre-test to make sure that they didn't know the words before introducing to the vocabulary unit. And every student took this assessment that participated in the study. And they listened to each statement twice. Then there were 4 sections. They were divided into 2 different groups. The students were instructed the same and given the same vocabulary, and each class met every other day. And the control group were provided traditional flashcards. So they had a picture on the front and they had the word written on the back, just on an index card. The experimental group received logins and access to a vocabulary study app called Quizlet. The Quizlet app, they would have it on an iPad, they could touch it and go back and forth, and they had an audio associated with it as well. Students in both the control group and the experimental group were exposed to these study methods at 50-minute increments during their class period over the 3 weeks. So, regression analysis was run for the pre-test and the post-test, the IU or the iPad users, and the NIU or the non-iPad users. So when you look at the raw data, you can see that in the pre-test, the average score was 46, and then the post-test was 79. With the non-iPad users, it was 55, and the post-test was 71. And then you have here the standard deviations for each group. Unfortunately, when the regression analysis was ran, the control group had an F value of 0.26 with a p-value of greater of 0.05. And as well in the experimental group, what this means, if you're not familiar with regression analysis, is that these numbers were not statistically significant. So it cannot be used to say that one group performed better than the other group using the regression analysis. So possible reasons for the lack of statistical significance could be the small sample size. So due to the constraints of my research and only being able to implement it at one school with one set of students, there was only 86 students that participated in this study. If I had run a paired t-test, it might have shown statistically significant results with the data, but that was not part of the initial research proposal. So a larger sample size and then possibly a repeated data set. So if I had done it over the course of a year with different sets of vocabulary, we might have been able to see more of a pattern, but it was not the case for the data set that I used. So iPads and cell phones are becoming more and more popular as teacher tools in the classroom. So just because my data wasn't statistically significant doesn't mean that there's not a need for further research in order to see the possible benefits or drawbacks of this type of technology, whether it actually affects learner achievement or not. And why this research could be important is when you think about how districts and states allocate and spend their technology funding. So if we can find data that shows, especially in any kind of, whether it's English language learning or foreign language learning, that these apps specifically help learners acquire vocabulary, it could target funding. And then we can also see differences between when certain schools have a lack of technology, how that can affect student achievement. And it can also help districts to write their cell phone and technology agreements, as a lot of school districts are trying to struggle. They're struggling how to fit in the technology in an appropriate way in the classroom and within the school setting. So more research on these things, on this mobile technology, could help. So, does anyone have any questions? At all? No? Daniel?
All right, how do you feel about Rosetta Stone when it comes to that kind of research?
So specifically, Rosetta Stone would be something that I would like to research when it comes to whole language learning acquisition. And that's something that could be used with, especially with English language learners. There wasn't a lot of research with that. So this was specifically with foreign language, and the curriculum that I had, the constraints of the curriculum I had to follow with my my school setting only allowed for me to do this certain set of vocabulary. So, yes.
Can you explain regression analysis?
So regression analysis is statistical. So a regression analysis is a statistical set it's run to see if there's a statistical difference between the performance factors of two different groups, a control group and an experimental group.
Gotcha.
Okay. Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you.